The Life Outdoors radio show with Nate Bailey. Everything you need to know about hunting Southern Oregon. Wake the wild within.
There is so much more about hunting than pulling a trigger or releasing an arrow, and today we're going to talk about that. And one of the big things is I drew my antelope tag after 13 years of waiting, and I drew it in a place that's near and dear to me, and the unit is Ochoco. It's Ochoco unit in Central Oregon, and it's not the best pronghorn tag to get. Definitely some of the trophy size and those kind of things kind of play against it, but there's one thing about this unit that is special, and that is the fact that I have spent a ton of time and I have so many memories in this unit that I just really want to hunt the unit for what it is. And I've seen a lot of antelope over the years in this unit. My uncles have drawn in the past, and my cousins have drawn in the past, and they all got antelope in this unit. And it's really interesting to me when I start looking, because when I say that there's more to hunting than pulling a trigger or releasing an arrow, this is part of what I'm talking about. You guys may have seen our t-shirt or our t-shirt that says tradition. It has a little old Ford Bronco on it. That Bronco is actually a picture of my uncle's Bronco. And I can remember that Bronco clear back in when I was, 5, 6 years old. And so when we talk about the things that the life outdoors are, or barebow hunter for that matter, it's tradition. And when we talk about things of hunting, I look around and I see the hunting community changing. We're getting a lot of new people in that don't have any tradition in hunting and don't have any of the old kind of way that you grew up in hunting, and maybe don't even have a grandfather or father that they have memories with in hunting. And that's not a bad thing. I'm not bagging on that, but at the same time, I want to point out to those people that hunting is a lifestyle. It's something that has been in cultures and handed down from generation to generation for years. And it also has to do with certain areas and geography, and there's a whole lot more to it than just going out and getting meat. Don't get me wrong, that's one of the big things about it, but there is something bigger than that, right? There's something a lot bigger to it than that. The uncles that I was around growing up, the men that taught me a lot about hunting, one of their ashes is spread in this unit. Another one, we have a plaque of memorial in this unit. And so there's so much more to going to the Ochocos and hunting a pronghorn. And the animal itself, right? Pronghorns are a animal of the West, and they're in our lore. And you look at native cultures that grew up in this country as well. And I consider myself growing up in this country and understanding some of those ideas of having special places. I couldn't imagine with the European expansion, when people were being put on reservations, people that have spent their whole lives in this ground and have special things going on in this ground. It's sacred. And for them to be just rooted up and told that they can't be there anymore, I don't think I could have been as patient as a lot of the native people were patient. And I look at that now, because there's places we have in this unit. We have places we call Hodge Point. We have places that we call the blind. We have all of our own little names for these geographic areas, and it's not ours, it's public land. But at the same time, we feel like there is some kind of ownership to it, and we do look after the land and the animals over there. We're always paying attention to what's going on. My uncle, he keeps track of it, and he's over there all the time, and he grew up there. So let me go back just a little bit and let you know a little bit about the history that my family has with this land. My uncle started going there when it got out of reserve. I think it was in the 40s. And then of course my uncles were just boys then, and my mom was just a kid, and they'd been going there every year. And like most blue collar people, this was their vacation. Okay. They might have mixed some trips in to, like Prineville Reservoir to go fishing. They were from Sandy, Oregon. And, so this was their vacation, and this was the time that they grew up, and they grew up in this unit. They grew up. This is how life was. It was a part of who we are as the Hodges. If you know anybody in the Hodge bunch, and that means the Baileys too that were brought in. My mom's a Hodge. That was her maiden name. But the Baileys and all the other people that were brought in, the Haynes and all these people that were brought in, they were all part of this big thing that revolved around the hunt. And so it's a part of us. I remember as a kid, when my uncles would come back and they'd have deer, and they'd be cleaning the deer, and we would always have the legs. They would knock the legs off at the first knuckle, and us kids would be running around camp with those hooves, making tracks everywhere around camp. And I could still, you could just understand to this day, when you're a kid and you see the rigs coming back, everybody was checking to look in the back to see if maybe the back was open on the Bronco, or maybe the arms were hanging out the window and had blood on them. And we'd always check. Every time somebody came back, we would check. And back in those days, there was a lot of mule deer, you guys. But it was pretty cool to grow up like that. I was over there in my mother's stomach in October before I was born in November, and then every year after that until I went into the Coast Guard. And then I missed a few, and then once I got out of the Coast Guard, we've been back almost every year since. Even if we don't draw tags now, because it's all control units, even if we don't draw tags over there, we now go over there for a reunion in August or in June, and swim in the same swimming holes we did as kids, fish in the same creeks as we did as kids, and all of those things that we did growing up. So, with that said, I got some history over there, and it is quintessential Western kind of long prairies with deep canyons, box canyons. It's the kind of stuff you'd see in a Western movie. And I'm not going to talk it up too much because I don't want you guys getting tags to go over there. But one thing that I wanted to point out was I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one that feels this way about this unit. There was actually a war that went on over there, and it's not that far back. That war wasn't really as long ago as we like to think it is sometimes. It was, in the late 1800s. So, yeah, it's 100 years ago or whatever you want to say. But it's pretty crazy when you start looking at people that have gone before you. And I've stepped on the same rocks as these people. And there's a great book or a series, and it's called Thunder Over Ochoco, and it talks about the history of Oregon, really. And a lot of stuff was based in Ochoco that happened in Oregon, especially during like the Indian Wars and things like that. A lot of stuff was trapped into this, or was based out of the Ochoco. There's a place called Big Summit in Ochoco, and it's all owned privately now by big ranches. But back then, the Indians, that's where they based all their stuff. I'm going to read, this is out of the third volume of Thunder Over Ochoco, and I'm going to read about that Big Summit, and it'll kind of give you an idea of how nostalgic this hunt's going to be, and It's give you an idea of what we're looking at when we go over there. Where we're going to take off in this book is there were a group of people that lived in the Big Summit, and they were the Shoshone people, and they matter of fact they were really smart warriors, and they actually tried. So the chief of this warring party, there was a lot of different Shoshone, but this group was kind of the ones that led the rebellion against the expansion of Europeans. And Has No Horse, it would be the English name of this fellow, who was kind of a war leader over there, and he stayed in Big Summit a lot. You know, they could make raids down into Klamath area. They did a lot. They'd make raids down into Klamath area, grab cattle, because there were quite a few settlers down in that area. They'd grab cattle and then drive them back up to the summit, and then they'd be able to keep the cattle there on the summit, and that way they could winter, go through the winter. And he was kind of the leader of the rebellion against that, and he actually had I don't remember how many warriors with him, but they sent several parties in to try to get him out of there, to try to roost him out of there. And if you look at just some of the geography, some of the names of the creeks and stuff there, just past the Big Summit, there's a bunch of breaks in there, which are actually going to be where I hunt. And I've hunted there for years, and I didn't know why these names were there until I did a bunch of research. But there's Looney Creek, Stupid Creek, and Crazy Creek up there, and they all kind of come out of the same spot. Well, the reason that the legend is, and I can't confirm this completely, but it's probably pretty smart. The legend is the reason that those names of those creeks became, Looney, Crazy, is because that's where the cavalry go in, and they'd set up those camps in there. And the sergeants of the day, because they would go through lieutenants pretty quick, they were moving lieutenants back and forth and in and out, but the sergeants, they weren't moving. Their enlistments out here in the West was a lot longer than an officer. Well, a new officer would come in, and they'd move them up there, and they'd be told to go in there and get the Shoshone out of there, get the Has No Horse and those guys out of there. Well, they would go in, and strategically it looked like a good place to camp, but all of the sergeants knew that it was not a good place to camp. So when they would pick a creek to camp on, they would say it was loony to camp there, or it was crazy or stupid to camp there. And that's how the legend has it that these names of these creeks came about. But at that area, that was the area of Has No Horse and his tribe, and even Paulina was in there at times. And Paulina, you got to understand that there were a certain group of these guys that were trying to get all of the natives together and make a confederacy and fight. The problem is they fought so much among themselves that it was really hard for them to actually get together. And I think history would look a little different if they pulled it off, because it took years to try to get Has No Horse out of there, and Yellow Jacket and those guys. It took them forever to try to get them out of there. And I think that's part of the reason it was in, it wasn't reservation. It was, I don't know. It was set aside, but I think that's part of the reason it was until the 40s, is they were trying to keep that from happening again, because it was so hard to get them out of there the first time. And if you look at the Ochoco and you look how it's situated, and Big Summit especially, you could see that it's really hard to penetrate as far as the geology is concerned. And if you come up through Lookout and you come through that pass in there's places in there that are so tight that they'd have somebody at the lookout, and they'd be waiting for them on the other end when they get through, and they just absolutely run them down. And so that was one of the big problems they were having getting through there. So I'm going to read you a little bit of information here. This is from that era, And this is when the dragoons were sent in there, and what they found on Big Summit. And some of the stuff is still there. I hunt around Big Summit. I hunt on the public stuff around Big Summit. But it's pretty crazy when you start seeing exactly what they were doing there. And I'm going to read this and talk. It'll give you a little bit of the history and a little bit of the mystique of the Ochoco.
Hunting Southern Oregon. The Life Outdoors radio show on Gold Country Radio with Nate Bailey. Keep it tuned right here for more ways to perfect your craft. Coming up next, Wake the Wild Within.
Want to get your business noticed? Sponsor a show on KKFO Gold Country Radio on 103.3 FM and create awareness through on-air announcements, our online stream at goldcountryradio.org, and our podcasts that live on forever. Your message reaches a broad local audience while also targeting listeners who choose to tune in to the shows they love. Plus, we promote your sponsorship across our website and social media. For more information, email goldcountryradio@gmail.com. Call 541-238-6989 or visit goldcountryradio.org. Gold Country Radio, your message heard locally and beyond.
The Life Outdoors radio show with Nate Bailey. Everything you need to know about hunting Southern Oregon. Wake the Wild Within.
Based on information he had obtained from the Paiutes about the Indian Trail leading to the forks of the Crooked River into John Day Valley, Bonnie Castle sent Lieutenant Johnston with 15 dragoons. Yellow Jacket and Samuel Johnson were wagon masters, and they had 10 days of ration to explore this route on July 1st. And I bet you it was pretty warm there on July 1st. I've been over there in July, and there's a lot of grass. They didn't have to worry about feeding their cows or anything, or feeding their horses or anything. But the day Captain Wallen left Camp Division, it was Bonnie Castle's intention to link the trail with Scholl's survey. So there's a bunch of things going on right now. The dragoons were going into the interior. There were people going around it. And the way that this author writes this is he's got so many hundreds of things going on at once, it's hard to keep up with. Meantime, Bonnie Castle swept into Paulina Valley and went east without sighting an Indian. But he did locate what would become the northern section of the Wairika Trail. Doubling back through Rabbit Valley, he united with Lieutenant Dixon, and they began the exploration of Big Summit Prairie, where they found evidence of recent large Shoshone encampment. Around the outer perimeter of the deserted camp, there were improved rifle pits and breastworks of logs. This was the first recorded evidence of actual field fortification constructed by Indians, discovered some 22 years before Joseph of the Nez Perce was given credit for that military feat. I don't know why this is such a big deal. Of course they did. Of course they had. Of course they had rifle pits. They've been fighting forever. It always makes me laugh when I hear people talk about even ancient people, the Indians there weren't ancient, of course, but of course they had rifle positions and they knew what they were doing. I don't know why that was something that people were like, oh my gosh, they actually had rifle fortifications. Have you ever been to Captain Jack's Stronghold in California? They were master tacticians. They knew exactly what they were doing. Matter of fact, Has No Horse was running weapons into Captain Jack during the war, and nobody even knew it until later. That's how masterful they were at what they did. And, okay, we're going to continue here. They were more impressed over this discovery than the supply route that they were searching for. It cracks me up. I can't believe that the Indians had places to shoot from and they fortified it. From a military standpoint, this was extremely valuable information, for it gave the Army forewarning of what type of people were defending the Ochoco. They should have known that. If you follow this book and you follow the things that happened there, there were several engagements. several engagements. But this bit of intelligence was ignored in the belief that the Indian could not possess such knowledge of military tactics, much less apply it. They would find out real quickly that that wasn't the case. They would find out real quickly that they would get their butts handed to them, and they did for several years. I was over 20 years. They were getting their butts handed to them in there. They also observed mirror flashes on top of high flat-top mountains and tracks of horses which joined Big Summit Prairie and proceeded north over the high divide between Lookout Mountain and the cone-shaped spire of Round Mountain. This would be the track of the large war party en route to the upper Ochoco River Valley, the birthplace of Has No Horse, with the proceeds westward looking for a military link of the mid-Willamette Valley. So, with that being said, if you guys are still with me here, like I said, there's so much more to hunting than pulling a trigger. I am going to go over to this pronghorn hunt. I've been waiting 13 years for it. I've been putting in for 13 years, and I'm going to take my muzzleloader. And this muzzleloader I got from Three Rivers Archery, and I put together. But I just feel like for years, people have been hunting pronghorns in the Ochocos, and I kind of want to pay homage to that as I do it. Not just to those people, because, Has No Horse and his family have been there for who knows how long, but also my own family. One of the places that we normally see antelope a lot, my uncle Dick, who is no longer with us, I have a picture of this too, so it's totally a truthful story, and I was there when it happened, and I remember it, and that's where we placed his plaque, and I will include all that in the video that I make over there, and hopefully you guys will want to watch it. I'm not going to make that video to try to get views or whatever. I'm going to make it as a tribute to Ochoco and to our family and even to Has No Horse and to the soldiers that have died over there, because it's such a rich place. But he shot a deer. He shot a nice 4-point that was coming across the prairie. My uncle always carried a Browning. He had a Browning BAR 300 Win Mag, and he was a crack shot. Uncle Dick, he could outshoot just about anybody in the family. Uncle Lloyd, I know you, if you're listening to this, I know you shot a lot of your animals too, but I'm just saying that for some reason, man, he was just really a good shot. And he shot that deer, and it was like 10, 15 seconds afterwards, a coyote came running out of the same place that deer walked across. A lot of times back in those days, we did a lot of where we would set people up on the prairies, and then we'd push the draws, and the deer wouldn't come running out. They're far too smart for that. They never let us get that close. The big bucks, they would just sneak out, and as they snuck out, they would find the little spots of like juniper that linked two draws together across those prairies, and they'd sneak through that, and we knew that, and we'd sit in there. I bet you the Indians knew that too. I bet you that's how they did it too. But they would sit in there, and my uncle didn't quite make it to that patch yet before we pushed through, and that deer came across, and he shot it, and then not 5 seconds, 10 seconds after that, he shot a coyote. And I have a picture of him, and they both dropped within the same scope sighting, so he could see them both in a scope laying there dead. And it was pretty interesting when we got back up there, and he showed us the coyote and the deer that he'd shot. So, with that said, I have memories like that all over that place. We actually have a rock blind, and you guys might have seen it in some of our previous elk hunting videos, my mom and I sat on that point. I was all of 13 years old. I think 13, because I'd already killed a deer my 12th year, and then that was the next year. And we were sitting up there, and Mom wanted to make sure to sit with me to make sure that, you know, because I was 13, whatever, I don't know. She should have known better. I could sit anywhere in that country and not get lost. But we sat up on this point, and it's on top of this lava, and you could see all around you up there. And we were sitting up there, and it's a great little perch because, you know, if you look at any of those prairies, none of them are, they look flat kind of, but when you get in them, there's a lot of dips and things. Well, this little pinnacle you could sit on, and you could see all those dips, and you could see all the way across. So it was something that we sat in all the time, and then somebody would be pushing down in the canyon. Well, that happened, and my uncle was down in the canyon pushing around and kicking around, and they kicked out this nice 3-point buck. And I emptied my rifle, and I at the time I was shooting offhand, standing up, because I get down on a knee and I couldn't see it, so I'd have to stand back up and I'd shoot an offhand. And after I emptied my rifle, that buck just walked across the prairie and went back in the other side. But that was the pinnacle that we sat on. And the funny thing about that is when my uncle came up and I told him what happened, he's like, that's 350 yards. You're probably not going to hit anything 350 yards offhand. And kind of chewed me a little bit, you know, saying that's not a shot you should be taking. And he was right. I mean, I was shooting underneath that buck. And I mean, to the point where the buck wasn't really that concerned about getting out of there. He heard the shots. He didn't quite know where they came from, but I wasn't getting close enough to make him really, you know what I'm talking about. So anyhow, that little pinnacle spot, we called the first bull I called in over in Ochoco. We called him up out of, there's a little dip in there. I called him up out of that dip. And my dad called a bull out of there one year, and there's a little patch of timber that's just off of that. And my dad called a bull out of there, and he had my grandmother and my mom with him, and that bull started coming across, and they freaked out. And my mom, I don't know, the story goes she started to climb a tree. She was afraid that bull was going to come in there, and that ended up scaring the bull off. But to say that we have history over there is an understatement. But that pinnacle, one of our rules is over there is we made kind of like a little rock wall in there. And basically it's for rifle elk season, which I haven't done forever. Probably since 2000, no, not 2000, probably since 1991 or 1989. Anyhow, no, it's probably 1988. Because I started picking up a bow before I got out of high school. So anyhow, that little blind, if you pass it, you have to put a rock on it. And now it's pretty big. And basically, we built it to hold heat in, so the wind wouldn't blow the fire out when we're sitting up there. So, with that said, there's way more to hunting, you guys, than pulling a trigger. When I'm sitting in that blind, I could hear my uncles. I could hear his Jeep coming across, who's no longer with me. I could see my grandfather, his coveralls, walking into camp with his red hat and pulling the magazine out of his old 720, and I can remember or 760 Pump Master. I can remember all this stuff, and that's a part of hunting just as much as the rest of it. And all you guys that don't have this in your history, and you're listening to this, start creating it. Start creating this in your history, because this is ancient. This is something that humans have always had in them, is to talk about. I mean, you look at a lot of the native hieroglyphics, rock on the rock walls. They're writing down their memories too, and they're putting that out. And we do the same. So there is so much more to hunting than pulling the trigger or eating an elk. There's a whole lot more to it, and it lives within the human spirit, and it's something that we should celebrate. And that's what I'm going to try to bring with this next film when I go over to the Ochoco. And it's going to be more, you guys, it's going to be more about the hunt itself. And even if I don't film a kill in it, I'm going to get my pronghorn. But if I don't get to film it, because nobody's going to be able to be there with me to shoot the pronghorn, so I don't know if I could be able to film it. But the film itself is going to show something about hunting that we kind of have lost in this modern hunting society. And hopefully we start thinking about that and getting back to it. So hopefully you guys are still listening. Thanks for listening if you are. There will be more podcasts on this. I'm probably going to make some while I'm over there, because I just want to try to bring this out. And if nobody else listens to it and this just sticks around for my grandkids to listen to, so be it. But I think it has some value. I think it's something that people really want to attach themselves to, and I hope that's the case. So thanks for listening. I hope to see you guys on Instagram and on Facebook, showing off your traditions and building new ones and showing where that's going in your lives. All right. Thanks a bunch for listening. Until then, shoot straight.
Thanks for listening to the Life Outdoors radio show. Tune in next Sunday evening at 7 p.m. to continue to hone the primitive skills that man has always been meant to master. Hunting Southern Oregon. The Life Outdoors radio show with Nate Bailey. Wake the wild within.